The books of Dune, vast libraries of them indicated in the quotations which precede the chapters and in the appendix, fill many purposes. Libraries represent human endurance, our most profound, time-spanning dream. They are our immortality made symbol. There is also the fact that the Princess Irulan dominates the writing of the books of Dune. This emphasizes her role in the Imperium, just as a similar function is reserved for Hark al-Ada in Children of Dune. The wealth of literature indicates a rich history surrounded by tradition and myth, by academic fascination and increasing analysis, for which I give you an old Fremen saying quoted in Dune Messiah: "Truth suffers from too much analysis." But you can follow the story developments through the books of the Dune trilogy and, I hope, gain insights which would not be available to you without these works. There is no doubt that they are numerous. More than 75 titles are listed, and the most prominent is the Manual of Muad'Dib, from which we take this, our starting point. A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct. This every sister of the Bene Gesserit knows. To begin your study of the life of Muad'Dib, then, take care that you first place him in his time, born in the 57th year of the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, and take the most special care that you locate Muad'Dib in his place, the planet Arrakis. Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. With that warning in mind, we will begin with 3 items. First, a riddle of Arrakis. Challenge: have you seen the preacher? Response: I have seen a sandworm. Challenge: what about that sandworm? Response: it gives us the air we breathe. Challenge: then why do we destroy its land? Response: because Shai-Hulud, the sandworm deified, orders it. Second, a quotation from the Tleilaxu Godbook. No matter how exotic human civilization becomes, no matter the developments of life and society, nor the complexity of the machine-human interface, there always come interludes of lonely power when the course of humankind, the very future of humankind, depends upon the relatively simple actions of single individuals. And thirdly, this from the Mentat Handbook. Above all else, the Mentat must be a generalist, not a specialist. It is wise to have decisions of great moment monitored by generalists. Experts and specialists lead you quickly into chaos. They are a source of useless nitpicking, the ferocious quibble over a comma. The Mentat generalist, on the other hand, should bring to decision-making a healthy common sense. He must not cut himself off from the broad sweep of what is happening in his universe. He must remain capable of saying, there's no real mystery about this at the moment. This is what we want now. It may prove wrong later, but we'll correct that when we come to it. The Mentat generalist must understand that anything which we can identify as our universe is merely part of larger phenomena. But the expert looks backward. He looks into the narrow standards of his own specialty. The generalist looks outward. He looks for living principles, knowing full well that such principles change, that they develop. It is to the characteristics of change itself that the Mentat generalist must look. There can be no permanent catalogue of such change, no handbook or manual. You must look at it with as few preconceptions as possible, asking yourself, now what is this thing doing? Muad'Dib says, we came from Caladan, a paradise world for our form of life. There existed no need on Caladan to build a physical paradise or a paradise of the mind. We could see the actuality all around us, and the price we paid was the price men have always paid for achieving a paradise in this life. We went soft, we lost our edge. About Arrakis, he says, God created Arrakis to train the faithful. And he adds, Arrakis teaches the attitude of the knife, chopping off what's incomplete and saying, now it's complete because it's ended here. Of his change from Caladan to Arrakis, Muad'Dib says, there should be a science of discontent. People need hard times and oppression to develop psychic muscles. Irulan writes of this young Paul Muad'Dib, many have marked the speed with which Muad'Dib learned the necessities of Arrakis. The Bene Gesserit, of course, know the basis of this speed. For the others, we can say that Muad'Dib learned rapidly because his first training was in how to learn. And the first lesson of all was the basic trust that he could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe they can learn, and how many more believe learning to be difficult. Muad'Dib knew that every experience carries its lesson. He was warrior and mystic, ogre and saint, the fox and the innocent, chivalrous, ruthless, less than a god, more than a man. There is no measuring Muad'Dib's motives by ordinary standards. In the moment of his triumph, he saw the death prepared for him, yet he accepted the treachery. Can you say he did this out of a sense of justice? Whose justice, then? Remember, we speak now of the Muad'Dib who ordered battle drums made from his enemies' skins. The Muad'Dib who denied the conventions of his ducal past with a wave of the hand, saying merely, "I am the Kwisatz Haderach. This is reason enough." And Irulan describes him. The hands move, the lips move, ideas gush from his words, and his eyes devour. He is an island of selfdom. In the commentaries you find this. It is said of Muad'Dib that once when he saw a weed trying to grow between two rocks, he moved one of the rocks. Later, when the weed was seen to be flourishing, he covered it with the remaining rock. That was its fate, he explained. Of his role as prophet, Irulan writes, Muad'Dib could indeed see the future, but you must understand the limits of this power. Think of sight. You have eyes, yet cannot see without light. If you are on the floor of a valley, you cannot see beyond your valley. Just so, Muad'Dib could not always choose to look across the mysterious terrain. He tells us that a single obscure decision of prophecy, perhaps the choice of one word over another, could change the entire aspect of the future. He tells us the vision of time is broad, but when you pass through it, time becomes a narrow door. And always he fought the temptation to choose a clear, safe course, warning that path leads ever down into stagnation. But Hark al-Ada had these comments. Muad'Dib gave us a particular kind of knowledge about prophetic insight, about the behavior which surrounds such insight, and its influence upon events which are seen to be online, that is, events which are set to occur in a related system which the prophet reveals and interprets. As has been noted elsewhere, such insight operates as a peculiar trap for the prophet himself. He can become the victim of what he knows, which is a relatively common human failing. The danger is that those who predict real events may overlook the polarizing effect brought about by overindulgence in their own truth. They tend to forget that nothing in a polarized universe can exist without its opposite being present. Church and state, scientific reason and faith, the individual and his community, even progress and tradition, all of these can be reconciled in the teachings of Muad'Dib. He taught us that there exist no intransigent opposites except in the beliefs of men. Anyone can rip aside the veil of time. You can discover the future in the past or in your own imagination. Doing this, you win back your consciousness in your inner being. You know then that the universe is a coherent whole, and you are indivisible from it. And the men-taught Duncan Idaho said, Muad'Dib's teachings have become the playground of scholastics, of the superstitious and the corrupt. He taught a balanced way of life, a philosophy with which a human can meet problems arising from an ever-changing universe. He said, humankind is still evolving in a process which will never end. He said this evolution moves on changing principles which are known only to eternity. How can corrupted reasoning play with such an essence? Whence came this ruler of men? What of his parentage? There is this from the family commentaries. How do we approach the study of Muad'Dib's father? A man of surpassing warmth and surprising coldness was the Duke Leto Atreides. Yet many facts open the way to this duke. His abiding love for his Bene Gesserit lady, the dreams he held for his son, the devotion with which men served him. You see him there, a man snared by destiny, a lonely figure with his light dimmed behind the glory of his son. Still, one must ask, what is the Son but an extension of the Father? Muad'Dib himself says, "There is probably no more terrible instant of enlightenment than the one in which you discover your father is a man with human flesh." In A Child's History of Muad'Dib you find, "There is a legend that the instant the Duke Leto Atreides died, a meteor streaked across the skies above his ancestral palace on Caladan." And an anonymous chronicler penned these lines at the Duke's shrine. "This rocky shrine to the skull of a ruler grants no prayers. It has become the grave of lamentations. Only the wind hears the voice of this place. The cries of night creatures and the passing wonder of two moons, all say, his day has ended. No more supplicants come. The visitors have gone from the feast. How bare the pathway down this mountain." Irulan writes of Muad'Dib's mother, "What had the Lady Jessica to sustain her in her time of trial? Think you carefully on this Bene Gesserit proverb, and perhaps you will see. Any road followed precisely to its end leads precisely nowhere. Climb the mountain just a little bit to test that it's a mountain. From the top of the mountain, you cannot see the mountain." The Lady Jessica was a Bene Gesserit sister, and her daughter had this to say about the Bene Gesserit. Thus spoke Saint Alia of the Knife. "The Reverend Mother must combine the seductive wiles of a courtesan with the untouchable majesty of a virgin goddess, holding these attributes in tension so long as the powers of her youth endure. For when youth and beauty have gone, she will find that the place between, once occupied by tension, has become a wellspring of cunning and resourcefulness." This is how Irulan reports on Alia, Muad'Dib's sister. "The Fremen see her as the earth figure, a demigoddess, whose special charge is to protect the tribes through her powers of violence. She is Reverend Mother to their Reverend Mothers. To pilgrims who seek her out with demands that she restore virility or make the barren fruitful, she is a form of anti-mentat. She feeds on that strong human desire for the mysterious. She is living proof that the analytic has limits. She represents ultimate tension. She is the virgin harlot, witty, vulgar, cruel, as destructive in her whims as a Coriolis storm." Like father, like son, then, so it is with Leto II, the son of Paul Muad'Dib. It is for Leto II to live all the lives within him, all the lives of his ancestors. And he says, "We can still remember the golden days before Heisenberg, who showed humans the walls enclosing our predestined arguments. The lives within me find this amusing. Knowledge, you see, has no uses without purpose, but purpose is what builds enclosing walls." Of Leto II's holy metamorphosis it is written, "He removed himself from the evolutionary succession. He did it with a deliberate cutting action, saying, 'To be independent is to be removed.' Both twins saw beyond the needs of memory as a measuring process, that is, a way of determining their distance from their human origins. But it was left to Leto II to do the audacious thing, recognizing that a real creation is independent of its creator. He refused to reenact the evolutionary sequence, saying, 'That, too, takes me farther and farther from humanity.' He saw the implications in this, that there can be no truly closed systems in life. And this is Leto's vow. I hear the wind blowing across the desert, and I see the moons of a winter night rising like great ships in the void. To them I make my vow. I will be resolute and make an art of government. I will balance my inherited past and become a perfect storehouse of my relic memories. And I will be known for kindliness more than for knowledge. My face will shine down the corridors of time for as long as humans exist." Thus it can be written in the Proverbs of Muad'Dib. There exists no separation between gods and men. One blends softly casual into the other. It is no accident that the government which comes into being around Muad'Dib is, at its core, a religion. Muad'Dib says of this, When law and duty are one, united by religion, you never become fully conscious, fully aware of yourself. You are always a little less than an individual. When Muad'Dib won his victory and his Fremen raged through the empire, the character of that empire changed. You see this when a poor historian condemned to death is interviewed by a priest follower of Muad'Dib. These are excerpts from the death cell interview with Bronso of Ix. What led you to take your particular approach to a history of Muad'Dib? Why should I answer your question? Because I will preserve your words. Ah, the ultimate appeal to a historian. Will you cooperate then? Why not? But you'll never understand what inspired my analysis of history. Never. You priests have too much at stake to try me. Try you? Well, again, why not? I was caught by the shallowness of the common view of this planet, which arises from its popular name, Dune. Not Arrakis, notice, but Dune. History is obsessed by Dune as desert, as birthplace of the Fremen. Such history concentrates on the customs which grew out of water scarcity and the fact that Fremen led semi-nomadic lives in still suits, which recovered most of their body's moisture. Are these things not true, then? They are surface truth. As well ignore what lies beneath that surface as try to understand my birth planet, Ix, without exploring how we derived our name from the fact that we are the 9th planet of our sun. No, it is not enough to see Dune as a place of savage storms. It is not enough to talk about the threat posed by the gigantic sandworms. But such things are crucial to the Arrakeen character. Crucial? Of course. But they produce a one-view planet in the same way that Dune is a one-crop planet, because it is the sole and exclusive source of the spice melange. Yes, let us hear you expand on the sacred spice. Sacred. As with all things sacred, it gives with one hand, and it takes with the other. It extends life and allows the adept to foresee his future, but it ties him to a cruel addiction and marks his eyes as yours are marked. Total blue without any white. Your eyes, your organs of sight, become one thing without contrast, a single view. Such heresy brought you to this cell. I was brought to this cell by you priests. As with all priests, you learned early to call the truth heresy. You are here because you dared to say that Paul Atreides lost something essential to his humanity before he could become Muad'Dib. Not to speak of losing his father here in the Harkonnen War, nor the death of Duncan Idaho, who sacrificed himself that Paul and the Lady Jessica could escape. Your cynicism is duly noted. Cynicism. That, no doubt, is a greater crime than heresy. But you see, I'm not really a cynic. I'm just an observer and commentator. I saw true nobility in Paul as he fled into the desert with his pregnant mother. Of course, she was a great asset as well as a burden. The flaw in you historians is that you'll never leave well enough alone. You see true nobility in the holy Muad'Dib, but you must append a cynical footnote. It's no wonder that the Bene Gesserit also denounce you. You priests do well to make common cause with the Bene Gesserit sisterhood. They too survive by concealing what they do, but they cannot conceal the fact that the Lady Jessica was a Bene Gesserit trained adept. You know she trained her son in the sisterhood's ways. My crime was to discuss this as a phenomenon, to expound upon their mental arts and their genetic program. You don't want attention called to the fact that Muad'Dib was the sisterhood's hoped-for captive messiah, that he was their Kvisatz Haderach before he was your prophet. If I had any doubts about your death sentence, you have dispelled them. I can only die once. There are deaths, and there are deaths. Beware lest you make a martyr of me. I do not think Muad'Dib. Tell me, does Muad'Dib know what you do in these dungeons? We do not trouble the Holy Family with trivia. And for this Paul Atreides fought his way to a niche among the Fremen. For this he learned to control and ride the sandworm. It was a mistake to answer your questions, Inquisitor. But I will keep my promise to preserve your words. Will you really? Then listen to me carefully, you Fremen degenerate, you priest with no god except yourself. You have much to answer for. It was a Fremen ritual which gave Paul his first massive dose of melange, thereby opening him to visions of his future. It was a Fremen ritual by which that same melange awakened the unborn Aaliyah in the Lady Jessica's womb. Have you considered what it meant for Aaliyah to be born into this universe, fully cognitive, possessed of all her mother's memories and knowledge? No rape could be more terrifying. Without the sacred melange, Muad'Dib would not have become leader of all Fremen. Without her holy experience, Aaliyah would not be Aaliyah. Without your blind Fremen cruelty, you would not be a priest. Ah, I know you Fremen. You think Muad'Dib is yours because he mated with Chani, because he adopted Fremen customs. But he was an Atreides first, and he was trained by a Bene Gesserit adept. He possessed disciplines totally unknown to you. You thought he brought you new organization and a new mission. He promised to transform your desert planet into a water-rich paradise, and while he dazzled you with such visions, he took your virginity. Such heresy does not change the fact that the ecological transformation of Dune proceeds apace. And I committed the heresy of tracing the roots of that transformation, of exploring the consequences. That battle out there on the plains of Arrakeen may have taught the universe that Fremen could defeat Imperial Sardaukar, but what else did it teach? When the stellar empire of the Carino family became a Fremen empire under Muad'Dib, what else did the empire become? Your jihad only took 12 years, but what a lesson it taught. Now the empire understands the sham of Muad'Dib's marriage to the Princess Irulan. You dare accuse Muad'Dib of sham? Though you kill me for it, it's not heresy. The princess became his consort, not his mate. Chani, his little Fremen darling, she's his mate. Everyone knows this. Irulan was the key to a throne, nothing more. It's easy to see why those who conspire against Muad'Dib use your analysis of history as their rallying argument. I'll not persuade you, I know that. But the argument of the conspiracy came before my analysis. 12 years of Muad'Dib's jihad created the argument. That's what united the ancient power groups and ignited the conspiracy against Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib says of this, "You cannot avoid the interplay of politics within an orthodox religion. This power struggle permeates the training, educating, and disciplining of the Orthodox community. Because of this pressure, the leaders of such a community inevitably must face that ultimate internal question, to succumb to complete opportunism as the price of maintaining their rule, or risk sacrificing themselves for the sake of the Orthodox ethic. It is a paradox, as Muad'Dib notes. Deep in the human unconscious is a pervasive need for a logical universe that makes sense, but the real universe is always one step beyond logic." He adds, "There exists a limit to the force even the most powerful may apply without destroying themselves. Judging this limit is the true artistry of government. Misuse of power is the fatal sin. The law cannot be a tool of vengeance, never a hostage, nor a fortification against the martyrs it has created. You cannot threaten any individual and escape the consequences. Good government never depends upon laws, but upon the personal qualities of those who govern. The machinery of government is always subordinate to the will of those who administer that machinery. The most important element of government, therefore, is the method of choosing leaders." Hark al-Ada's comment on the Butlerian Jihad is pertinent here. The assumption that a whole system can be made to work better through an assault on its conscious elements betrays a dangerous ignorance. This has often been the ignorant approach of those who call themselves scientists and technologists. And the instruction manual of the Missionaria Protectiva adds another pertinent note. These are illusions of popular history, which a successful religion must promote. Evil men never prosper. Only the brave deserve the fair. Honesty is the best policy. Actions speak louder than words. Virtue always triumphs. A good deed is its own reward. Any bad human can be reformed. Religious talismans protect one from demon possession. Only females understand the ancient mysteries. The rich are doomed to unhappiness. And even more pertinent are the words from the workbook of Liet Kynes, first planetologist of Arrakis. Because of the one-pointed time awareness in which the conventional mind remains immersed, humans tend to think of everything in a sequential, word-oriented framework. This mental trap produces very short-term concepts of effectiveness and consequences, a condition of constant, unplanned responses to crises. Although he uses laws and legal orders to rule, Muad'Dib sees this in terms of energy. He says, "The convoluted wording of legalisms grew up around the necessity to hide from ourselves the violence we intend toward each other. Between depriving a man of 1 hour from his life and depriving him of his life, there exists only a difference of degree. You have done violence to him, consumed his energy. Elaborate euphemisms may conceal your intent to kill, but behind any use of power over another, the ultimate assumption remains, I feed on your energy." And he says, "Production growth and income growth must not get out of step in my empire. That is the substance of my command. There are to be no balance of payment difficulties between the different spheres of influence. And the reason for this is simply because I command it. I want to emphasize my authority in this area. I am the supreme energy eater of this domain, and will remain so, alive or dead. My government is the economy." This is the fallacy of power. Ultimately, it is effective only in an absolute, a limited universe. But the basic lesson of our relativistic universe is that things change. Any power must always meet a greater power. Paul Muad'Dib taught this lesson to the Sardaukar on the plains of Arrakeen. His descendants have yet to learn the lesson for themselves. Muad'Dib says, "Empires do not suffer emptiness of purpose at the time of their creation. It is when they have become established that aims are lost and replaced by vague ritual." The roots of such ideas are to be found in the Bene Gesserit teachings, as witness these quotations. Governments, if they endure, always tend increasingly toward aristocratic forms. No government in history has been known to evade this pattern, and as the aristocracy develops, government tends more and more to act exclusively in the interests of the ruling class, whether that class be hereditary royalty, oligarchs of financial empires, or entrenched bureaucracy. Or this: in all major socializing forces, you will find an underlying movement to gain and maintain power through the use of words. From witch doctor to priest to bureaucrat, it is all the same. A governed populace must be conditioned to accept power words as actual things, to confuse the symbolized system with the tangible universe. In the maintenance of such a power structure, certain symbols are kept out of the reach of common understanding, symbols such as those dealing with economic manipulation, or those which define the local interpretation of sanity. Symbol secrecy of this form leads to the development of fragmented sublanguages, each being a signal that its users are accumulating some form of power. And the Bene Gesserit Panoplia Prophetica says, "If you believe certain words, you believe their hidden arguments. When you believe something is right or wrong, true or false, you believe the assumptions in the words which express the arguments. Such assumptions are often full of holes, but remain most precious to the convinced." Muad'Dib says, "How often it is that the angry man rages denial of what his inner self is telling him." He adds, "The concept of progress acts as a protective mechanism to shield us from the terrors of the future." Muad'Dib often appears both cynical and wise. He says, "Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. He must reflect what is projected upon him, and he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. This is what uncouples him from belief in his own pretensions. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man." Sometimes Muad'Dib rages. I've had a belly full of the god and priest business. You think I don't see my own mythos? Consult your data once more, hate. I've insinuated my rights into the most elementary human acts. The people eat in the name of Muad'Dib, they make love in my name, are born in my name, cross the street in my name. A roof beam cannot be raised in the lowliest hovel of far Ganja Shri without invoking the blessing of Muad'Dib. Sometimes he quotes the Bene Gesserit litany against fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past me, I will turn to see fear's path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Muad'Dib writes to the Lansrad ruling council, "Control the coinage and the courts, let the rabble have the rest." Thus the Padishah Emperor advises you, and he tells you, if you want profits, you must rule. There is truth in these words, but I ask myself, who are the rabble and who are the ruled? And to CHOAM, the interplanetary corporation which is the economic arm of the empire, he writes, "What you of the CHOAM Directorate seem unable to understand is that you seldom find real loyalties in commerce. When did you last hear of a clerk giving his life for the company? Perhaps your deficiency rests in the false assumption that you can order men to think and cooperate. This has been a failure of everything from religions to general staffs throughout history. General staffs have a long record of destroying their own nations. As to religions, I recommend a rereading of Thomas Aquinas. And as to you of CHOAM, what nonsense you believe. Men must want to do things out of their own innermost drives. People, not commercial organizations or chains of command, are what make great civilizations work. Every civilization depends upon the quality of the individuals it produces. If you over-organize humans, over-legalize them, suppress their urge to greatness, they cannot work and their civilization collapses." He asks, "What do you despise? By this are you truly known." And in the next breath he says, "There is in all things a pattern that is part of our universe. It has a symmetry, elegance, and grace. Those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons, in the way sand trails along a ridge, in the branch clusters of the creosote bush, or the pattern of its leaves. We try to copy these patterns in our lives and our society, seeking the rhythms, the dance, the forms that comfort. Yet it is possible to see peril in the finding of ultimate perfection. It is clear that the ultimate pattern contains its own fixity. In such perfection, all things move toward death." In despair, Muad'Dib cries out, "There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors." Now what brought the Atreides family to Dune? The Fremen and the spice mélange, the exhalation of the sandworm, both geriatric and an igniter of prophecy. Here is what is written about mélange in the Pedant Heresy. "It is commonly reported, my dear Georad, that there exists great natural virtue in the mélange experience. Perhaps this is true. There remain within me, however, profound doubts that every use of mélange always brings virtue. Meseems that certain persons have corrupted the use of mélange in defiance of God. In the words of the Ecumenon, they have disfigured the soul. They skim the surface of mélange, and believe thereby to attain grace. They deride their fellows, do great harm to godliness, and they distort the meaning of the abundant gift maliciously. Surely a mutilation beyond the power of man to restore. To be truly at one with the virtue of the spice, uncorrupted in all ways, full of goodly honor, a man must permit his deeds and his words to agree. When your actions describe a system of evil consequences, you should be judged by those consequences, and not by your explanations. It is thus that we should judge Muad'Dib." It's no wonder that that's called the Pedant Heresy. Of the Fremen, Muad'Dib says, The Fremen were supreme in that quality the ancients called Spannungsbogen, which is the self-imposed delay between desire for a thing and the act of reaching out to grasp that thing. Muad'Dib's son is speaking of the Fremen when he says, "A sophisticated human can become primitive. What this really means is that the human's way of life changes. Old values change, become linked to the landscape with its plants and animals. This new existence requires a working knowledge of those multiplex and cross-linked events usually referred to as nature. It requires a measure of respect for the inertial power within such natural systems. When a human gains this working knowledge and respect, that is called being primitive. The converse, of course, is equally true. The primitive can become sophisticated, but not without accepting dreadful psychological damage." A Bene Gesserit report says, "Fremen speech implies great concision, a precise sense of expression. It is immersed in the illusion of absolutes. Its assumptions are a fertile ground for absolutist religions. Furthermore, Fremen are fond of moralizing. They confront the terrifying instability of all things with institutionalized statements. They say, 'We know there is no summa of all attainable knowledge. That is the preserve of God. But whatever men can learn, men can contain.' Out of this knife-edged approach to the universe, they carve a fantastic belief in signs and omens and in their own destiny. This is an origin of their Kralazak legend, the war at the end of the universe." Liet Kynes is quoted by Hark al-Ada. "Fremen were the first humans to develop a conscious-unconscious symbology through which to experience the movements and relationships of their planetary system. They were the first people anywhere to express climate in terms of a semi-mathematical language, whose written symbols embody and internalize the external relationships. The language itself was part of the system it described. Its written form carried the shape of what it described. The intimate local knowledge of what was available to support life was implicit in this development. One can measure the extent of this language-system interaction by the fact that Fremen accepted themselves as foraging and browsing animals." Hark al-Ada writes, "After the Fremen, all planetologists see life as expressions of energy and look for the overriding relationships. In small pieces, bits and parcels, which grow into general understanding, the Fremen racial wisdom is translated into a new certainty. The thing Fremen have as a people, any people can have. They need but develop a sense for energy relationships. They need but observe that energy soaks up the patterns of things and builds with those patterns." And Stilgar, the Fremen Naib, says, "A Fremen dies when he is too long from the desert. This we call the water sickness." Even the preacher speaks to the Fremen tragedy. I will not argue with the Fremen claims that they are divinely inspired to transmit a religious revelation. It is their concurrent claim to ideological revelation which inspires me to shower them with derision. Of course they make the dual claim in the hope that it will strengthen their Mandarinate and help them to endure in a universe which finds them increasingly oppressive. It is in the name of all those oppressed people that I warn the Fremen. Short-term expediency always fails in the long term. There are clues to the mysteries of the Fremen and Muad'Dib in the songs of Dune. Listen to their words. "O doctor of beasts, to a green snail shell with its timid miracle hidden awaiting death, you come as a deity. Even snails know that gods obliterate and cures bring pain, that heaven is seen through a door of flame. O doctor of beasts, I am the man-snail who sees your single eye peering into my shell. Why, Muad'Dib, why?" And, "O seas of Caladan, O people of Duke Leto, citadel of Leto, fallen forever." Or this, "Orchards and vineyards and full-breasted houris, and a cup overflowing before me. Why do I babble of battles and mountains reduced to dust? Why do I feel these tears? Heavens stand open and scatter their riches, my hands need but gather their wealth. Why do I think of an ambush and poison in molten cup? Why do I feel my years? Love's arms beckon with their naked delights, and Eden's promise of ecstasies. Why do I remember the scars, dream of old transgressions, and why do I fear to sleep?" And this from the moon falls down. He has gone from Aliyah, the womb of heaven. Holy, holy, holy. Fire-sand leagues confront our Lord. He can see without eyes. A demon upon him. Holy, holy, holy. Equation he solved for martyrdom. There is the dirge for Jameis. Do you wrestle with dreams? Do you contend with shadows? Do you move in a kind of sleep? Time has slipped away. Your life is stolen. You tarried with trifles, victim of your folly. And these 4 lines. O Paul, thou Muad'Dib, Mahdi of all men, thy breath exhaled, sent forth the hurricane. Or these. O worm of many teeth, canst thou deny what has no cure? The flesh and breath which lure thee to the ground of all beginnings, feed on monsters twisting in a door of fire. Thou hast no robe in all thy attire to cover intoxications of divinity or hide the burnings of desire. And a children's ditty. There was a man so wise, he jumped into a sandy place and burnt out both his eyes. And when he knew his eyes were gone, he offered no complaint. He summoned up a vision and made himself a saint. Or a love song. My woman stands at her window, curved lines gainst square glass, upraised arms bent, down-folded, gainst sunset red and golded. Come to me, warm arms of my lass, for me, the warm arms of my lass. Or a Fremen hearth song. The CH at the desert's rim was Liat's, was Cain's, was Stilgar's, was Muad'Dib's, and once more was Stilgar's. The Naibs one by one sleep in the sand, but the CH endures. I should add a Tlilaxu epigram. Here lies a toppled god, his fall was not a small one. We did but build his pedestal, a narrow and a tall one. Muad'Dib recognized that atrocities have been committed in his name and that more would come. And this is an echo in these words from the Apocrypha. Atrocity is recognized as such by the victim and perpetrator alike, by all who learn about it at whatever remove. Atrocity has no excuses, no mitigating argument. Atrocity never balances or rectifies the past. Atrocity merely arms the future for more atrocity. It is self-perpetuating upon itself, a barbarous form of incest. Whoever commits atrocity also commits those future atrocities thus bred. On all these matters, the Commission of Ecumenical Translators comments, The universe is God's. It is one thing, a wholeness, against which all separations may be identified. Transient life, even that self-aware and reasoning life which we call sentient, holds only fragile trusteeship in any portion of the wholeness. Muad'Dib appears to be saying something similar when he speaks to his Fedaykin. The universe is just there. That's the only way a Fedaykin can view it and remain the master of his senses. The universe neither threatens nor promises. It holds things beyond our sway. The fall of a meteor, the eruption of a spice blow, growing old and dying. These are the realities of this universe, and they must be faced regardless of how you feel about them. You cannot fend off such realities with words. They will come at you in their own wordless way, and then you will understand what is meant by life and death. Understanding this, you will be filled with joy. As we began with 3 items, we should conclude with 3 items. First, the Gola's hymn. No bitter stench of funeral still for Muad'Dib, no knell nor solemn rite to free the mind from avaricious shadows. He is the fool saint, the golden stranger living forever on the edge of reason. Let your guard fall, and he is there. His crimson peace and sovereign pallor strike into our universe on prophetic webs, to the verge of a quiet glance. There. Out of bristling star jungles, mysterious, lethal, an oracle without eyes, cat's paw of prophecy, whose voice never dies. Shy Halud, he awaits thee upon a strand, where couples walk and fix eye to eye the delicious ennui of love. He strides through the long cavern of time, scattering the fool self of his dream. Second, Stilgar's comment on the travail of Muad'Dib. You do not beg the sun for mercy. And finally, from the Khazarit Creed. We say of Muad'Dib that he has gone on a journey into that land where we walk without footprints.